Hey, everybody. Welcome to our new experimental show that we're doing tonight. If this ends up being a train wreck, it may be the one and only show that we do. But this is a new concept here of something we're trying out on New Jersey Revolution Radio, where I get a really smart person to co host the show with me and we talk a little bit about some theory. So if you've listened to my show before, then you definitely know who my guest is, but you may have never actually seen his face before. Jeremy Einbinder's been on my show at least twice, I think, if not more. He's from Democratize the Media, and he's just a well-known activist here in New Jersey. Welcome to our new experiment.
I'm glad to be here.
So, why are we doing this again? What made us decide to do this?
You asked me to, and I said yes.
Okay. I can always count on you to be honest here. So I guess the first thing I thought we should talk about tonight, you have a couple of things you want to take us down some divergent tangents, but one of the things I struggle with, and I don't even always call myself a communist necessarily, even though I kind of am a communist, is individualism versus individuality. And I actually went to Jeremy with this question, is why I thought it would be a great first topic of discussion. And it's something I struggle with because I've always thought people are the individual is important, even though we're you hear a lot about rejecting the individual. Go ahead, Jeremy.
There's a lot of misconception that the individual is rejected under a different social order because of the propaganda that the individual is somehow valued under the system that exists right now. And because, there can be a face of a company, there are a few people who can experience individual freedom under capitalism, and those are the capitalists. The only people who can are the people who privately own property, companies, means of production, generally brands, and things that are great about the culture, things that people love, things that people consume, at least great from their eyes. It could, it's a mixed bag, the brands, but anything that makes a lasting impact, the people who own the thing, the company, get the fullest individual freedom in a way the rest of the people in the world don't.
Right.
So individualism is, in a sense, every person being for themselves and competing with one another to be at the so-called top of society in a sort of somewhat less rigid caste system, but not too flexible, because the rate of upward mobility from one class to another is not great.
No.
But in a way, it's, in a sense, collectivist in the other direction capitalism is, because it forces people to compete in one giant playing field where they're all mutually exploited. They compete with one another to kiss the most ass to the boss. They want to either, have their sense of self returned to them after an 8-hour workday every day. When even then, all they can do is basically consume the brands on the television or the internet that they're put in front of them, that they're too exhausted to think critically of, because they spend a whole day at work at a job they don't like.
Right. And what you sent me when we were we had this discussion probably at least 6 months ago, was a writing by Oscar Wilde, The Soul of Man Under Socialism. And I think it speaks exactly to that point you were just making. Like, he talks about art as one of the, in the series, this whole essay, and that there is no real individual art right now because you have to create something that's consumable. So you have to create something popular right now because you have to live, you have to make money off your art. So you can't be an artist right now.
Mhm.
You just have to be almost like a tradesperson creating what someone wants to consume. You're not really being yourself. You're not even being an individual. If
Right.
and this is like an art. This is like the extremes of society where you think of, oh, well, that artist is really individual, but really under capitalism, even an artist can't be an individual.
And obviously, even a capitalist can't be too much of an individual because they're beholden to the respects of the almighty marketplace that they're always, chasing the next guy. And if they've won the race, if they're Amazon, if they're Google, they have to spend all their energy trying to be on top.
Right.
And for the worker, instead of trying to find their passions, find what they're good at, or find a medium between the two, they're all in the category of worker and a consumer. 500 companies in 500 multinational companies control 2/3 of the American gross domestic product.
Wow, 500 you said?
Yeah, I looked that up. The Fortune 500 controls 2/3 of the total GDP in America, and that's not a lot.
No.
And people say small business is the backbone of the economy, and empirical evidence suggests otherwise.
Right.
But I don't think giant businesses are necessarily a bad thing. I think it more comes down to the fact that the workers and consumers don't control it in coordination with one another. Everyone can have something that they can bring to the table, so to speak. But the way that capitalism measures someone's individual worth, is whether they have the potential to be a capitalist or whether they have the potential to be the most useful for a company that they'll never own. And that doesn't sound very conducive to individuality to me.
Definitely not.
But I think the concept between individuality and collective freedom is kind of a misnomer, a false dichotomy, because all individuals are part of a collective, and all collectives are made up of individuals. Um, you can't have something be for the greater good without it being good for the people within the group. So there's also a point that Wilde made about charities, is that they're basically wicked and destroy the spirit of man because they make people dependent on the rulers of society and make them beggars.
Yeah, in the beginning, it almost seemed a little bit like Wilde may be a bit of an accelerationist. With the arguments that charity just sort of prolongs the coming revolution, and without charity, people will rise up sooner. And that was kind of the very beginning of the essay. Was sort of how I got a little bit of accelerationist vibe out of it.
I mean, but he may be arguing for a fair tax system in the meantime. Like I don't think he would be opposed to that. Of course, the ideal is that you shouldn't have to redistribute wealth if it's properly distributed in the first place.
Right.
I shared a screenshot of a tweet the other day of Robin Hood, of a dialogue of Robin Hood giving money to a poor peasant, and the poor peasant's like, "Oh, thanks, I'm rich," and the dialogue was like Robin Hood narrowing his eyes and being like, "You're what?" No, the point really isn't to steal the money of the rich or even necessarily steal the stuff. It's to basically steal the stuff that they're not actually using.
Right.
You know, you can't hold an Amazon fulfillment center. You can't and hold, a Walmart location. You can't use those things. You can use the stuff inside them, and the people who
Right.
use the stuff inside them are working people. Um, I don't think that the small business owner will have any difficulty transitioning into an economy if they have to work with their coworkers. And I think that with the tendency of mergers and acquisitions in the capitalistic economy, it won't be too difficult for them to merge into a giant working class controlled corporation in which the international working class uh, owns all the giant companies and starves the small businesses of the capital that remains until they join the rest of the world, who hopefully will be happy controlling what they produce. Because you can't have I mean, just like in a capitalist economy, co-ops don't necessarily last or have a major impact. Act a small co-op, they can relieve some pressure because you own some means of production, but you don't have any control over distribution or exchange because you're so beholden to a World Bank controlled economy, an economy ruled, let's face it, by the American dollar. Because even if you're not in the country, the prince's currency, you're still beholden to it. So I think generally, maybe the workers at giant corporations around the world would act as some sort of a ruling cadre for the revolution.
Yeah, you've mentioned sort of this theory of like nationalizing Amazon before, which, I definitely, everybody thinks about smashing Amazon into bits, but nationalizing something that's kind of good at distribution is a good point to talk about, I think.
I also think we should nationalize Hulu and put all the things on it. Um, you
Yeah, not
know,
all these like 1 million different streaming services
yeah.
where you got to pay them $5 and over here and these guys $5 and these guys 10, and before you know it, like you've got 15 different services.
When I think about it, I don't think anybody really loves the free market all that much. If they did, they they wouldn't concentrate all their consumer power into a few select brands. You know,
Right.
like if you break up the tech monopolies and the food monopolies and the media monopolies and any other kind of monopolies there are, you're just starting the process over again. You know, the winner of free market competition is the monopolist, or if you want to be technical, the oligopolist, one of the few rulers. Like the Olympics, you know get a medal, get a few medals, but the winners are the owners of the giant corporations. Now,
Right.
I think the entire team would be able to celebrate in the productive capacity that they all create. I think consumers would have a say in how things are created. No, I know focus groups are a common thing in capitalism now, but they don't really address so much of someone's needs as opposed to what can make them the most money. If there's a need that consumers tend to have that's going to cost a lot of money to fulfill, they're not going to do it. they,
Right.
they need to find a balance between what the consumer wants and what can feasibly be done without costing a lot of money. Um, so that's another way in which individualism can be a good individuality rather can be a good thing. Whereas individualism generally brings everyone down to a market value, including the human being. Um, you know, for example, if you're disabled, it'll cost a lot of money for all your care needs to be met, and the same thing happens if you're of a marginalized gender or sexual orientation or race. You know, you can't pander too much to a marginalized demographic because you don't want to alienate everyone else who, by the way, tends to have more buying power than the marginalized identities. Even though there's more people who are in a sense marginalized than there are not, because in capitalism, in all sense, is minority he tends to rule. Globally, oh, European identity, whiteness is not the majority of who's on the planet.
Right.
I don't even think that there's a plurality of people who are white, but they're still in charge of colonialism around the world.
Right.
So I think that if we were able to cater to the needs of everyone in the community, that would be very good for the individual. So I think the notion of individualism or individuality versus the collective will is not accurate. I mean, in anti-communists tend to think of communism as a giant state force in which it's the same social dynamics of capitalism, except you're buying everything from the socialism store.
Right.
And that's completely inaccurate. Some people might disagree with me, but I don't think we need to disregard the brands. I think there can be helpful for categorization. I just think everyone needs to own the brands.
Right. And I think there's also a confusion just about socialism or communism in general of the government is still this overarching thing outside of the people. That it's some external force being applied onto people and quashing their individuality.
Well, that's because that's what people are used to with Republican government or Democratic Republican government, and so I want to be charitable. And that's what people are used to with monarchies too, even though they're not really involved. It's a separate entity from the people. But if you tell people, yes, the government will take over everything, but you're going to be in charge of the government along with everyone else.
Right. It's hard for people to wrap their minds around a little bit. I think that they're so used to having this oppressive thing that does not represent them, that the idea that, oh no, that the government's actually going to be you, it's just
Yeah, I think there's a big misunderstanding, and I think that people don't understand that private corporations are governances as well. Google is a government, Amazon is a government, Comcast is a government, and Verizon. These are all governments that are not accountable to the people who use them and are not accounted for by the people who work in them. And then, the democratic capacity of governments around the world is not to its fullest extent because it's always, it's always deferred to by the private corporations who generally fund the government and who are in charge of the mechanisms by which we measure success, mainly GDP and profit growth and things like that. to the extent that there are people who are literally willing to sacrifice the human species in order to prevent a popular uprising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're
And
seeing that all the time.
That's not very good for the individual either.
No, extinction's not good for the individual. Breaking news here on our new experiment here. Extinction is not good for the individual. But also, I think there's another discussion to be had of most people want to do something beneficial, and most people hate their jobs. They're doing something that's purely just contrived to make them be busy. Like, most jobs don't have value anymore. You're not doing something you love if you're in some middle management job. Like, you're just doing it to not die, essentially.
There are some jobs, like insurance, for example, that could go away under a system in which material needs are prioritized. I was saying this a couple weeks ago. That you could literally pay military contractors to do nothing if their salaries, and it would be a better distribution of resources as opposed to paying them to do their jobs. Now, like, jobs are not the be all and end all of human well-being, and the fact that the a green revolution might produce more jobs, good and jobs, is not really the thing we should be concerned about. I don't necessarily think that under a new social order that one should even consider themselves as having a job per se. I mean, there are certain specializations like doctor and athlete even, and maybe actor, because there are people who like doing those things, and it gets them social recognition. By the way, I think garbage people deserve more social recognition than they're getting.
Yes, absolutely. They literally keep us from getting sick. They keep us from like living in our own refuse. Like, they're doing almost, I would say, as much as doctors to keep us healthy.
Yeah.
Like, without a good sanitation system, we do not have a society.
Yeah, maybe we should talk to soldiers about transitioning into a specialty as a garbage person, because that would actually be useful to society instead of jacking other countries' resources for private control.
Right. Yeah, that I totally am with you on that one. That people that deal with like keeping our society clean and healthy do not nearly get the recognition that they should. Like, they're rock stars.
I mean, but there's also problems that capitalist society tends to create that might be alleviated under a different system. Like, I think that there's generally a case to be made that mental health is worse than it could be under a different system, because why are people stressed? They can't pay their rent. They don't like their job. They can't pay their mortgage. Maybe they can't see their significant other as often as they want to because they're working all the time. Or maybe they're having trouble ending expenses on their kids, or
Right. There's so many pressures under capitalism that rob us of our joy, that you just can't be who you want to be if you're just struggling to exist. I think then I did a whole show on that one with a therapist. She came in and she's like, yeah, and she wasn't even like a leftist, this therapist that I spoke to. And she's like, you're really kind of right. Under a different system, there probably would be an increase in mental health. Like, in general, people would, I mean, there's people that will always have mental health struggles, but a lot of this pressure and anxiety and agita of society would be alleviated under a different economic system.
There are ways in which people who are suffering under capitalism that wouldn't be possible under, like, have you ever asked someone why it is that they want to make money. They want to make money because they want stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And money is basically the access token that people need to get in order to exist, or they need to scrounge by on ways that they don't have to use money, but that limits their access. That's like I mean, there are people who like money in and of itself for the dopamine high. For example, makes you feel good when you get a paycheck, but only because you're deprived of something. It's
Right. Nobody likes these pieces of paper. Like you don't get a warm fuzzy like, oh, it's a president of a race or a picture of a racist white president. Yay. I can think of much better art I'd like to collect than pictures of racist white presidents.
Same thing with the concept of borders or countries and all. I mean, all over the world there are different regions that have different culture, or that people can merge, or people can separate and find their own little communities. But the whole idea of how many different regions are there in the United States as it exists? There's a lot of different regions. Mm-hmm. So you don't need we don't have internal borders between Oregon and California.
Right. Why do we need country borders even? Why, they're just made up. Well, I mean, borders are made up to control the flow of people, but allow unlimited flow of capital. That's why we have borders, to trap people in their economic situation. I mean, that's the only reason borders exist.
No presidential candidate, by the way, is willing to say that borders are bullshit, which sucks.
Right.
There's a tendency that even if the person who is the most appealing into populist rhetoric, it wins, Bernie Sanders is going to merely slow down the inevitable either uprising or reaction. And what I've said before, there's basically a tendency in America, especially, to go 8 years of one ruling party and then 8 years of another, 4 years of one, 8 years of another. I think it's been close to a century where a party's been in control for 16 years, and I don't know that. I mean, the fact that the representatives of the people, the fact that the governing mechanisms are in no election cycle have I ever heard, things are going great, let's keep up this track.
Right. No, you never hear that. You have very limited choices, but you have intense debate amongst those two choices to make it seem like you have choice. And it's always everything's hard. I mean, and everything is pretty bad. You're not wrong.
In terms of, media consumption, and, you can either accept the propaganda that's in front of you, or you can reject it, but you can't exactly construct a new narrative on your own. Like, it's very hard to imagine exactly how a communist society would work, a stateless, classless, moneyless society would work, because it hasn't existed for thousands of years since we evolved out of the hunter-gatherer societies.
Right.
And
well, we are just about out of time for tonight. We're at 29 minutes, and we said we were going to go for a half hour. Yeah. So what do you think? Should we do another one of these, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think this worked out well. There's
what do you got, our listeners? What do you think? Should we do another one? Post comments of what you think we should talk about next. What kind of questions do you have that you might want Jeremy and I to rattle on about for a half hour? Would you like to see another one of these? And, if enough people are interested, we'll definitely do another one, because I just always like talking to Jeremy. To listeners, like I said, if you want us to keep doing them, we'll keep doing them for you. Just let us know. Do you want a last word before we end the live stream, Jeremy?
There's so much more to be done.
Yes, there is. Absolutely. All right. I'm going to figure out how to end this broadcast now, because I've never done this before. I think I got it.